small, idyllic town of Whispering Pines, Vermont, nestled amidst lush green forests and shimmering lakes, life moved at its own unhurried pace. As was customary in such towns, secrets were shared, and gossip passed around like candy. But one secret remained concealed, a secret that would soon plunge this serene town into the heart of horror. John, a city slicker from New York, had moved to Whispering Pines 6 months ago, seeking solace from his chaotic life. He fell in love with the quaint, peaceful town and bought a rundown yet charming house on the edge of town, near the dense, seemingly infinite forest. The townsfolk were warm, the air was crisp, and life was peaceful. Everything was perfect. That is, until the late summer carnival rolled around. It was the biggest event in Whispering Pines. The carnival was a time of joy and celebration, a time to put aside differences and enjoy the games, the food, and the camaraderie. On the last night of the carnival, the town gathered for a grand feast followed by a bonfire. It was during this bonfire when the first incident happened. A loud, gut-wrenching scream split the laughter-filled air, sending waves of terror through the townsfolk. In the flickering shadows cast by the towering inferno lay the lifeless body of old Mrs. Higgins, her eyes wide open in terror, a deep slash across her throat. The laughter was replaced by screams, the joy by dread. The killer was nowhere to be seen. In the ensuing panic, John, who had served in the military and seen the worst of human nature, tried to maintain order. He persuaded everyone to go home and lock their doors until the sheriff arrived from the neighboring town. The next day, the sheriff and his men combed through the town and the nearby woods but found no traces of the killer. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock wore off, replaced by a nervous tension. John could sense the unease every time he walked into the town's only diner or visited the grocery store. Whispers followed him like ghosts, casting long shadows of doubt on the once jovial community. Then, the second killing happened. It was young Timmy, found in his room, his body slashed mercilessly. Again, no clues, no witnesses, only a deep, bone-chilling dread that held the town in its icy grip. This time, the townsfolk decided they could no longer rely solely on the sheriff and formed a vigilante group to guard the town at night. John was chosen to lead it, given his military background. Nights turned into a relentless game of cat and mouse. The vigilantes patrolled the town, their flashlights probing the darkness, their hearts pounding with a fearful anticipation. Despite their efforts, the murders continued. One by one, the townsfolk fell victim to the unseen slasher. Fear turned into hysteria, and the town, once a picture of tranquility, was now a town living in the shadow of death. One fateful night, while patrolling the edge of the town, John saw a figure move in the dense forest. Heart pounding, he followed it into the woods. The rustling of leaves underfoot, the eerie silence of the night punctuated by the distant hoot of an owl, added to the ominous atmosphere. The figure disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving John standing amidst the shadows. But then he saw something that froze him to the spot. A mask, a chilling clown mask, lay half-buried under the fallen leaves. His mind raced back to the carnival, to the masked figures laughing and dancing around the bonfire. A sense of dread settled over him as he realized the possibility. The killer could be anyone from the town, someone hiding behind a familiar face. He picked up the mask and headed back to the town. The next day he called a town meeting. The atmosphere was tense as he held up the mask. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, eyes widened in fear, in recognition. But no one came forward. The town was gripped in a suffocating silence. Days turned into a blurred haze of fear and suspicion. John could feel the weight of the mask, a sinister symbol of the horror that had befallen the town. He started piecing together the events, looking for connections, for a pattern. Each victim had been alone at the time of their death, each killing more brutal than the last, escalating in a gruesome crescendo. But who could be behind it all? One evening, while going through old town records in a desperate attempt to find something, anything, he stumbled upon a chilling detail. 40 years ago, around the same time, a series of similar killings had plagued the town. The murderer was never found, and the town had buried its bloody past, hoping to forget the horror. The only person who survived the attacks all those years ago was a young boy, Billy. John tracked down Billy, now a middle-aged man, a recluse living on the outskirts of the town. Billy was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to talk. He told John about the killings, about the clown mask the killer used to wear. His voice was a chilling whisper as he described the horrific scenes he had witnessed as a child. The slasher had always been someone from the town, he said, someone you least expect. Filled with a newfound determination, John headed back to town. He started observing the townsfolk more closely, looking for anything out of the ordinary. A cold realization dawned on him that the slasher could be anyone: the friendly grocery store owner, the soft-spoken librarian, even the sweet old lady who baked the best apple pies. Each smile now held a sinister edge, each friendly wave a potential death sentence. The weeks rolled by, filled with restless nights and fearful days. The townsfolk were losing hope, their once vibrant community now a ghost town. John felt the weight of their fear, their expectation pressing on him. He needed to end this, he needed to unmask the slasher. It was during one such sleepless night that a thought occurred to him. He remembered the night of the carnival, the bonfire, the dancing figures. He remembered seeing someone standing alone, away from the crowd, someone wearing a clown mask. The memory was vague, hazy, but it was there, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing. The next morning, he headed straight to the town's photo studio. The owner, an old man with a passion for photography, had been taking pictures of the carnival for years. He asked for the pictures from the bonfire night. As he shuffled through the photographs, he came across one that made his blood run cold. There in the corner, standing alone, wearing the clown mask, was the town's pastor, Father O'Malley. John couldn't believe it. The pastor had been a pillar of the community for years, a beacon of hope and faith. Could he really be the slasher? As the reality of it all sunk in, a chilling sense of dread filled him. He needed proof, something more concrete. He decided to search the pastor's house. The house, a stone's throw away from the church, was quiet. He broke in, his heart pounding in his chest. The house was immaculately kept. Not a thing out of place. He searched room after room, but found nothing. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed a trapdoor leading to the basement. With a sense of impending doom, he made his way down. The basement was dark, the air filled with a musty smell. As he switched on his flashlight, he recoiled in horror. The walls were adorned with newspaper clippings of the killings, both from 40 years ago and recent ones. There were pictures of the victims, and in a corner, a clown mask identical to the one he had found. But the most horrifying of all was a large shrine, pictures of the victims surrounded by candles, and in the middle, a picture of the pastor himself. With a sinking heart, John realized the horrifying truth. The pastor, the spiritual guide of the town, was the slasher. He had been living amongst them, sharing their joys, their sorrows, while cold-bloodedly taking their lives. He left the house, his mind reeling from the shock. As he broke the news to the town, the reaction was of disbelief. The pastor, a killer? It was unthinkable. But the evidence was irrefutable. The pastor was arrested by the sheriff, his serene face belying the monster beneath. The town breathed a sigh of relief, the nightmare finally over. Or so they thought. Because 2 days later, another body was found, brutally slashed. And the pastor was still in custody. Whispering Pines was again plunged into terror. If the pastor wasn't the killer, then who was? As the realization sunk in, the town descended into chaos. The true slasher was still out there, hidden behind a familiar face, waiting for his next victim. The horror was not over, it had just begun. The secret of Whispering Pines remained, hidden in the shadows, etching its bloody legacy into the fabric of the town. The slasher was still at large, and no one was safe. The tale of terror was far from over.